Your favorite video game is actually a massive trick played on your brain by a piece of silicon. And right now, hundreds of millions of people aren't choosing photorealistic graphics or next-gen power. They are choosing pixelated blocks. They are choosing low-fidelity worlds that look like they were built 30 years ago. And the question is, why? Because the industry is discovering something the game developers have been shouting about for quite some time. For 50 years, we thought the goal of gaming was to make digital worlds look exactly like the real one. Guess what? We were wrong. We are entering the era of infinite play, a world where artificial intelligence doesn't just play the game, it builds it while you're standing in it. A world where the controller actually disappears and your thoughts become the intent-based generation, where the user provides the intent via voice or simple prompts, and the AI generates the assets and logic in real time. But to understand where this is going, we have to look at a 4-meter tall machine from 1950 that only knew how to play one game: tic-tac-toe. It was called Birdie the Brain. It didn't have a screen, it didn't have a mouse, it used vacuum tubes to simulate a logic puzzle. And just to note, it also may have been a PR stunt for the Canadian National Exhibition to show off hardware. But however, researchers at the time thought this could be a scientific marvel. But if you look closely at Birdie, you see the first spark of a profound technological evolution. We think of gaming as a march towards better graphics, right? But it's actually a constant negotiation between what we want to do and what the hardware will basically let us do. In 1947, an analog circuitry device was patented that used a radar display to track a missile. There was no software, there were no pixels, it was just a dot on a glass tube. It was the Genesis, and it laid the groundwork for a medium that would eventually overtake movies, music, and sports combined. So let's look at the data. The trajectory from that radar display to neural direct interfaces is the fastest evolution of any tool in human history. In 1958, physicist William Higginbotham was at Brookhaven National Laboratories. He wanted to make the annual open house a little less boring, so he grabbed a Donner Model 30 analog computer and a small oscilloscope screen, and he created Tennis for Two. This wasn't like Birdie the Brain. No, it was a logic puzzle playing tic-tac-toe, right? Tennis for Two was actually a physics simulator. It modeled gravity, it modeled resistance. For the first time, winning wasn't just about knowing the right answer, it was about the reaction time. It was the first true gameplay loop. But there was a massive problem. You couldn't buy the game. You couldn't even copy the code. It was a physical setup of analog parts that was dismantled as soon as the visitors went home. The real shift happened in 1962 at MIT. This was the moment the video game became software, because the PDP-1 was a standard machine. The code could be shared. It spread through early hacker culture to the labs across the country, and it established a specific aesthetic that we still reference today. You may have heard of it, called vector graphics. Now, vector graphics, think of it like a digital pen drawing sharp lines directly on the screen. No pixels, no jaggies, just glowing stark lines against a pitch black void. And honestly, back then, it looked like the future, but it was actually just a shortcut, because early computers, it couldn't handle textures or filled shapes. They could only handle math and coordinates basically in 2D. As interactive entertainment moved out of the lab and into the living room, the story of gaming changed. It became a war against the silicon itself. And by 1977, engineers were trying to squeeze a universe into a machine with almost zero memory. And to do it, they had to invent a technique called racing the beam. Now imagine trying to paint a masterpiece on a canvas that is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And that was the Atari 2600. The system had only 128 bytes of RAM. And to put that into perspective, That's not enough to store a single modern digital photo. It barely has enough to store this text. Because there was no memory to store a frame buffer, a complete image of the screen. The computer had to work in real time. As the television's electron beam physically moved across the glass, the CPU had to update the graphics at the exact same time. If the code was microseconds too slow, the image would tear and the screen would just go black. This paucity of memory dictated everything we saw in the 70s. It's why Atari games featured symmetrical playfields and very few moving objects. The hardware could only support 2-player sprites, 2 missiles, and 1 ball per line. It was a world of strict mathematical constraints. But then in 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System arrived and staged a tile revolution. Instead of racing the beam, the NES used a dedicated picture processing unit. It viewed the screen as a grid of 8x8 pixel tiles. Think of it like a set of reusable stamps. The computer didn't have to calculate every dot on every line anymore. It just had to tell the system which stamp went where. And this changed everything. The NES could display up to 64 sprites on the screen. It had hardware scrolling, allowing backgrounds to move seamlessly. This architectural shift allowed games to move from abstract single-screen loops to these massive narrative worlds. We weren't just playing Pac-Man in a box anymore, we were exploring the kingdom of Hyrule. We were navigating the sprawling caves of Metroid. But as the technology continued to accelerate, the industry started trying to guess what comes next. And in the 1990s, those predictions became a mix of startling accuracy and total creative hubris. In the 1990s, gaming magazines like Next Generation and Edge were the prophets of the digital age. There was one absolute truth everyone agreed on: 2D was dead. In 1993, industry leaders predicted that 3D polygons would make sprites obsolete. For big budget games, they were right. I mean, Super Mario Bros. And Final Fantasy made the jump. But look at the indie scene today. 2D obviously didn't die. It became an aesthetic choice, not a technological relic. It was an era of massive confidence and deep anxiety. Next Generation magazine even ran fake retrospective covers in 1999. They imagined headlines from 1980 declaring Atari is unstoppable. It was a joke about how bad we are at seeing the future, and in 1979, one executive said people wouldn't play electronic games for more than a week. But by 2025, the market is worth over $200 billion. In 1984, Negroponte saw the potential for high-resolution touchscreens decades before they became common. But we were terrible at predicting the timing. The 90s were obsessed with virtual reality headset and direct brain interfaces, even way back then. The reality was the Virtual Boy, a commercially disastrous flicker of what was to come. It would take another 30 years to solve the latency and processing power, those hurdles that required to make actual VR work even today. This gap between prediction and reality brings us to the present day, because the gaming landscape of 2025 has created a massive paradox. While hardware giants push for photorealism and 8K resolution, the most popular games on Earth feature blocky, low-fidelity graphics. That divergence tells us something important. For the mass market, immersion has shifted. It's no longer about visual realism. It's about creative control and social presence. There are games like Roblox and Minecraft, and these platforms aren't cinematic. And the reasons they are winning is actually a matter of biological efficiency. Think about the way your brain actually processes an image. When you see a photorealistic face, your brain is doing the heavy lifting of decoding every shadow and every skin pore. But when you see a simple pixelated block, the work shifts. Your brain actually fills in the blanks. It moves from processing to actually imaging, and this is the secret engine behind platforms like Roblox and Minecraft. They aren't blocky by accident. They are blocky by design. First, also, there's accessibility. High-fidelity games require expensive hardware, but low-fidelity games can run on almost anything, from high-end PCs to budget smartphones in a student's backpack, and this creates the network effect. A child on an old iPad can play in the same world as a friend on a professional rig. It turns the game into a third place to go, a digital hangout that replaces the physical mall or the park. And second, it lowers the barriers to creation. The abstract style acts as a digital canvas, and it's much easier, obviously, for users to build something when they know the building blocks are simple. Even competitor gamers in Fortnite are choosing this path. They intentionally switch to performance mode, which strips away the high-end textures to maximize frame rates and reduce input lag. Because for them, responsiveness is the only real immersion. But while these millions, and I say millions, are building and hanging out in lo-fi worlds, another side of the industry has mastered a different kind of loop. One that doesn't rely on your imagination, but on the science of actual probability. It's called the Gacha model. And it didn't start in a lab. It started with a plastic capsule in a Japanese vending machines of all places. Today, it is a digital industrialization of the psychology of gambling. Games like Genshin Impact use what is called a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. This is obviously a technical term for the exact same mechanism behind things like slot machines. Your exchange currency for a random chance to get a specific character or item. But there's actually a clever system design at work in these types of systems. It's called a pity system. The game guarantees you win after a certain number of failures. And this isn't just them being nice, obviously. It's a way to balance the fear of missing out with the sunken cost fallacy. It actually encourages players to keep spending until they actually hit a guarantee. From a systems perspective, this actually creates a bifurcated economy. Because on one side, you have the free-to-play users. They are the population. They make the world feel alive. And on the other side, you have the whales. These are the small percentage of high spenders who fund the entire ecosystem. And this model is incredibly effective, but it also is under intense scrutiny, obviously. Governments are starting to look at these mechanics and mechanisms as an unregulated gambling system. But the way we spend money isn't the only thing changing. The way that we watch games is becoming just as important as playing them. By 2025, watching game content is projected to take up more time than actually playing for millions of people. And it's creating a new kind of spectator that deconstructs the game entirely. And this is called speedrunning. Speedrunning is the act of completing a game as fast as humanly possible. It's more than just a race. It's an adversarial relationship with the code itself. Players don't just play the game, they actually deconstruct it. They hunt for glitches, memory leaks, and frame-perfect inputs to bypass what the designers actually intended. They turn software into a competitive puzzle. And by 2025, watching this level of play has become a global spectator sport itself. Look at the numbers. Awesome Games Done Quick 2025 reached a peak of nearly 97,000 concurrent viewers. The French event Speedrunning in 2025 raised over 2.2 million euros for charity with a peak audience of over 78,000 people. Even RTA in Japan reached over 68,000 viewers that same summer. And this isn't a niche hobby anymore. It's a thriving, decentralized ecosystem. For certain groups of people, time spent watching these games now eclipses the time spent actually playing them. This fundamental shift is erasing the line between the player and the viewer, and as we head towards 2030, that line is going to disappear completely, because the future of gaming isn't just about watching someone else play the game. It's about a new format called massively interactive live events, or for short, MILES. I mean, imagine a world where millions of people simultaneously influence a single persistent story, where the distinction between watching a show and playing a game no longer exists. Think of it like a scale. On one end, you have lean-back entertainment. Netflix, traditional TV, you watch, but you don't actually touch. And on the other hand, you have lean-forward entertainment. This is traditional gaming. You are the active operator in the loop. The future lives in the middle. It's called lean in. This is the world of massively interactive live events, or MILES. Companies like GenVid are pioneering this right now. As we speak, they have a project called Rival Peak. Millions of viewers simultaneously influence a persistent story, and they act like a collection of one type of god. They solved puzzles and cleared the fog to help AI characters survive. It wasn't just one person at a keyboard, it was a crowd steering this ship. But this new frontier, it also has significant growing pains. Take the case of Silent Hill, Ascension. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It promised massive interactivity, but it actually failed to connect with fans. The monetization was seen as too aggressive, and players were essentially paying just to vote. When agency is diluted among millions of people, it can start to feel like no one has any real power. The narrative can become chaotic, to say the least. A design by a committee that alienated the core audience. It's a reminder that giving players control requires a delicate balance. But that data shows the trend isn't stopping. Gen Z is already moving this way, spending more time in interactive worlds than watching traditional TV. And to feed this demand for endless content, the industry is turning to the most powerful tool that we currently have in our arsenal: artificial intelligence. We aren't just talking about smarter enemies. We're talking about games that build themselves while you watch. We are moving from scripted to generative. And for decades, if you talk to an NPC, obviously a non-playable character, they had a pre-written script. You choose either option A or option B. But now startups like In-World AI are using large language models to give these characters actual brains. They have distinct personalities, and they also have memories. They remember what you did to them. If you are aggressive to a shoekeeper, they don't just lower the reputation meter. The AI encodes that interaction into a context window, and then that character, it remembers you. And then it distrusts you because of what you did to it, and you know what you did. This looks like magic, but it's just looking at the logic. The game engine itself is becoming a dynamic factory. It synthesizes world states and dialogue in response to your direct intention, what you do in the game. Google's Project Genie, which has just launched this past week if you are an Ultra viewer or Ultra member, and this project takes that even further because it can actually generate playable 2D worlds from a simple text prompt. If you type something like Gothic Castle with low gravity and lava pits, seconds later, you are playing in it. For studios, this is a solution to the content crisis because players are consuming content faster than humans can actually build it. AI can automate textures and code and voice and make sure that it lines up and keeps up, but this efficiency, just like everything with AI, actually has a pretty significant dark side. It raises ethical questions about copyright, as it should, and it risks displacing human artists and hollowing out the workforce. We are trading human touch for infinite scale. And this leads us to the final frontier, the moment where even the controller itself becomes obsolete. It's a signal directly to your brain. Valve Corporation and Gabe Newell believe brain computing interfaces, or BCIs, are the digital endpoint of immersion right now. Tomorrow, though, the game might read your emotions in real time. If you're bored, it can amp the difficulty rating. If you're scared, it can pace the horror. We are already seeing these type of prototypes out in the real world. The Galia headset integrates EEG sensors into a virtual reality display. While The Matrix is still decades away, can't stress that enough, not here tomorrow or the next day, but decades away, controlling a digital world with your thoughts is moving from theory to testing. And this leads us to a profound question, because by 2030, will we actually be gaming at all? The answer actually might be no, not in the sense of beating a predefined level that we're used to. Instead, we will be inhabiting digital realities, because the industry is shifting from a finite type of product like a plastic cartridge to facilitating an infinite process. We are moving into an economy driven by user-generated content. And by 2030, this model could be worth up to $350 billion. The line between the person who makes the game and the person who plays it is being erased forever. From the massive vacuum tubes of the 1950s to the neural interfaces of the 2030s, the story of gaming is the story of us. It is our collective subconscious. And it's steered right now by Silicon Valley, as are a lot of other things. But it's a collaborative dream engine, and we are only just waking up to it. So, in the meantime, what are you gaming? What are you doing on your gaming systems? I'd love to know. But until then, thank you for tuning into the ARQIV. Stay tuned for the next episode.